Oh, okay.
All right. Welcome to contracts class. So we're gonna do, today we're gonna focus on the contract to buy and sell, which is in layman's term known as the offer, okay? Knowing how the mechanics of this works is super important regardless of who your client is. If you are a buyer's agent, and if you are a new buyer's agent, and you've never filled out a contract, the better you are at writing contracts, the less likely you are to expose yourself as a brand new agent. Right, you want the other side to know this is your first one, right? I was looking at one the other night for somebody on an offer that they received, and the appraisal deadline was after the closing date. Do you think they exposed themselves a little bit in their skill set? A little bit, right? So the more you know contracts, the better off you guys are all going to be. When you are on the listing side, to understand the contract to buy and sell and what should go there, lets you be able to look at it in those eyes and go, okay, what doesn't make sense? What do I need to change? Because in that case, now you're thinking about what's best for your seller and what do I have to do to create counter offer? So for me, all of the contracts are super important, but I really think this one is probably one of the most important ones. Because at the end of the day, this is between a buyer and a seller, and if you get it wrong, you have a problem. So can I tell your story from last night? As an example, Luke was the listing agent and closed last night, yesterday afternoon. Got a text message from the buyer's agent at the closing table. Said, hey, the inclusions on the contract said there's a garbage disposal and there's not one in the house. Oops. Right? We both missed it, right? We both missed it when we looked at the contracts and all of that stuff. And it could have been a really big problem. We already figured out the solution, but we ended up closing. But being aware of the details, and the details matter more than you'll ever know. Liz, I've got copies of contracts, the contract and also date guide up there. If we need to print more, we will. Okay, so for those of you that are on Zoom, I'm now going to put in the chat the documents. Or at least I'm gonna try to. Okay. Contract class files, I want this. It's one of them. So I'm gonna give you best practice. And this best practice is what I would say the most helpful way to learn contracts, okay? If you sit only in this class and you don't take down any notes, then you might as well just leave now. I'm just being honest, right? I've given you guys all copies of the contract to buy and sell. My best practice is this: write notes on it and then keep it, hang on to it. So when you go to write that first offer, we have something to go look at and go, what did Margaret say? Okay. The other thing is, these recordings are always uploaded on YouTube, so they're on the coaching YouTube channel. I've actually had people literally go watch the contract class, pause it, fill out their contract, go watch the contract and go back and forth. That works also. The other thing is, if this form doesn't change, sometime this year, at least once, if not twice, Kevin Wilson, who's our operating principal, will also come in and teach his deep dive contract class, which by the way, is usually worth 4 free CE credits. Nothing being better than 4 freebies, right? Mm-hmm. Take the same document and add the notes, right? Because you don't want 20 versions to look through notes. So that was one of the things that when I was a newer agent was really helpful to me, was to be able to look at my notes and then try it. Then I sent it to the coach. I got a laundry list of feedback for those of you that have sent contracts to me. It's the first time you get a laundry list. You do, but do you get better as a result of it? Say yes. Okay, so those are my best practices. Casey, do you need a copy of the contract to buy and sell or the date guide, or do you already have it?
Me?
Yeah, you're Casey.
Oh, well, you're right. That's a scary thing. Yes, I have everything. Thank you.
Awesome, because I did put it in chat, but I think you came in late, and Stacy, if you can grab a 10 for me, that would be fantastic, so. Awesome, all right, well, you ready to dive in?
Yeah.
What are your questions? For those of you that have done this, let me do this. What question do you have about the contract with myself? I wanna make sure I hit it. Okay. I think the answer was, I don't know what I don't know, Margaret, so teach me. This is an interactive class. If I start going down a path and you don't understand what I'm talking about, please stop me and we will back up. Okay, fair enough? All right, so let me close this so I don't have to look at that. Let me share my screen. Okay, so all of you, I gave you a copy of the contract to buy and sell form, and I actually downloaded this from the Dora website. So all of the Colorado contract forms are on the Dora website. So you could go out to Dora and download the forms and fill them out that way when you have your first client. I would do that if I'm in practice mode. What I would do if I'm going live with a client is I'm gonna sign up for the software CTME. Okay, CTME is free for the first 30 days. So hopefully by the time you get your first bill, you got that client under contract and you're looking at a closing check. Okay, the forms you will not find on Dora are the forms from our attorney. And so some of those forms are required. I'm not gonna hit any of those today, but when we start doing the exclusive right to buy and or sell, there's forms that our attorney also requires when you're working with buyers and sellers. So, but if you wanna just practice writing them, just go out the door and download them and just start having a party. I will say this, if you wanna practice and you wanna write contracts with Barney Rubble, Fred Flintstone, Wilma, whoever, George Jetson, whoever you could want to make them up and you want me to look at them, I am more than happy to do that. Just let me know it's not a real one. Because I do try to respond to the real ones relatively quickly. Okay, but if you've got a practice one that you just wanted me to look at and say, how much of this did I get right? How much of this did I get wrong? Then just let me know that, just in the header of the email, just say practice. And I'll still get to return it pretty quickly. Fair enough? All right. So what we have in front of us is the contract to buy and sell. I am actually going to go to the template that I have built. I can move this thing. Okay. Now maybe here we go. I have built templates for all of my contracts because that way I take my notes from my contract class and some of the basic stuff or the reminders is in my template. I am not going to teach you how to use templates today. CTM has some great classes. I love their beginner class and I love their intermediate class. But honestly, if you haven't even tried to use the software yet, I probably wouldn't go yet. Okay, it's one of those things that I had to fight my way through it the first time with my mentor helping me. Then I went and Stacy and I went and took the class together and all of a sudden all the light bulbs started going off, right? Then I went and took the intermediate class and I started learning their shortcuts and some ways to make my life easier. Why do I want you to go take that from them instead of me? When did I take my last class? 2015. Have they made updates to the software? I can hack around in it. Go learn from the people that own the software, that teach the software every day and know some of the new tips and tricks and shortcuts that they have in there. Fair enough? And I think the classes are free. And I think some of them, they used to give you CD credit. So, okay, questions? All right, okay, these on twice, okay. All right, so this is the contract to buy and sell. When you first sign up with CTM, you're going to want to make sure that you enter your information correctly. What do I mean by that? You want to make sure that you show the correct brokerage. You'll notice that our logo is on this. Okay, you work for you are a portion of Keller Williams Avenues Realty, LLC. It's not K-Wave. It's not KW. It's not Keller Williams. It's Keller Williams Avenues Realty, LLC. If you put that in correctly, their system will automatically put our logo on your documents, and it will automatically tie you to all of the names, forms, and clauses. Okay. You wanna make sure that your name in CTM as the broker mirrors your name as it appears on your license. If you've had a name change since you got your license, you're gonna wanna go through the steps with Dora to get those updated before you update it in CTM. Okay? All right, questions on that so far? Okay, how do I know I have the right contract? Well, I kind of have to know when they went and booked that. There was this little event last year in August of 2024 that required all of the forms to be changed. So here you can see this form went into effect January of 2024 and it became mandatory in August. We didn't have a lot of forms updates in January, which is when we normally see them as a result of the August activities. I would anticipate when we get to January 2026, we will see some form changes. So just being aware when those form changes are going on. You guys are blessed, you work in a market center, that we communicate that at a pretty good level. Okay? You always just wanna make sure, especially when you're in that crunch time, right? Like if you write the contract, you start writing the contract on December 31st, but your client doesn't sign it till January 1st, what do you think you should have done? Wait until January 1st. Okay? All right, here we go. So we're doing the contract to buy and sell. In bold, it says this form has legal consequences and the parties should consult legal and tax or counsel before signing. One of the things I like to do when I teach this class is I don't want to teach you just how to fill in the blanks. I also want to teach you how to explain it to your clients. How's that work? All right. So, Mr. Buyer, I'm going to pretend I'm working with a buyer. Okay. Mr. Buyer, this form, if there are things in here that you don't understand or I am unable to explain them to you at a level that you're comfortable with before you sign anything, please reach out to either legal or tax counsel. Okay. You probably already said that in your exclusive right to buy or exclusive right to sell, but it never hurts to repeat it. Okay. Then you're going to fill in the date. What is the date that you're filling it out? That's what goes here in the date column. Okay. This agreement is between the buyer and the seller, and the purpose of it is for the purchase of property. So in section 2.1, you're going to put in the buyer's name. Pro tip, make sure your buyer's name matches how they filled out the loan application. Which, by the way, is how you should have done your exclusive right to buy. True story, my mother's maiden name was Van Dyne, V-A-N space capital D-U-I-N. For some reason, my family out here decided to remove the space, and I didn't know it. Okay? So I'm helping my cousin Rex buy a house. How do you think I spelled the name that I grew up in? With a space. Mitch was his lender. Mitch calls me 4 days before closing and said, hey, can you do an amendment and fix Rick's names? And I'm like, what do you mean I need to fix Rick's name? He goes, you need to remove the space in Van Dyne. Really? But it was that technical, right? So knowing if you've got a buyer who's got a loan, tie it all up right up front. Make sure your exclusive right to buy matches their name, and then that'll automatically feed over here. Okay. The other part in section 2.1, you have a choice between joint tenants, tenants in common, or you can check other. And in other, I have written in my template just a hint that says in several two. Can anyone tell me the difference between joint tenants and tenants in common?
It's been a while, but joint tenants is like you can't change it, right? Like there's no, if someone dies, you can't just add in another person. It's still, there's like 3 people, one dies, then it's still just the 2.
Close.
Okay.
You got those.
Advanced survivorship?
It's all about survivorship. There we go. You went to Charles real estate school, didn't you?
Now in here.
Oh, that's right, you were with Kathy, okay. I was about to give him credit. You're right, it's all about survivorship, right? So joint tenancy is survivorship. So if Jamie and I were gonna buy a house together and we did it joint tenancy and something happens to me, she automatically gets 100% of the house. Okay, we own the house at the same, we have the same vested interest in the house. Okay, when you're dealing with tenants in common, the tenants in common, yeah, and do you have both documents there or just the one? Okay, I need to print you a date template. Okay, so The tenants in common means that whatever percentage we own at the time we bought the house, we stay. So if Jamie and I own that house together, we agree up front it's 50-50. If something happens to me, my 50% goes through whatever it says in my will or probate. Okay, now it might go to her, but it might also go to Liz. Now Liz owns half the house with Jamie owning the other half. Okay, so making sure you can explain that anytime you have more than one person or entity purchasing the home. Okay,
And Margaret, if they say like, what should we pick, is that when you say, I would advise you to consult?
I would explain to them the difference.
Okay.
Because very quickly, if they're buying the home as a couple, right? Then they're like, oh yeah, something happens to me, I want him or her to get 100% of it, then that's what it is, and that's typically what you're gonna see, right? But if you have two individuals or more buying investment property, that's when it may start to change. I've also seen it where a child and parents are buying, and there's other siblings, the parents don't want their portion to automatically go to the kid that they bought the house with. Because they wanna keep it fair for the rest of the siblings. Okay, whenever you have a single entity, either a single person or an LLC or a trust, then you're going to check other and you're going to use the words in severalty. That means I'm by myself. Okay. Section 2.2 just means, Mr. Buyer, that this is not an assignable contract. If you're going to make it assignable, and you're most likely going to find us if you're dealing with an investor. Investors like to buy properties, they do the contract in their original name, but before they get to closing, they've created an LLC for that property. So oftentimes there will be a clause that we'll put in here that says that, let's say Stacy's buying it, and she's an investor who uses multiple LLCs, which is very popular. A lot of investors will do an LLC based on the property address. They don't even bundle them all together, okay? So she might say, she'll put a clause in that says, I have the right to assign this contract to an entity owned by myself, okay? We teach that in the clause catalog as far as the clauses, right? But that's the only time you would use that, okay? The seller, this is where you're gonna get the seller's name. When you're using CTM, one of the beautiful things about CTM is you can, if both agents are CTM users, you can actually sync to their listing documents. Which means that however the seller's name is on the exclusive right to sell for that listing agent, that's gonna automatically pull that name over into your contract to buy and sell. Unless you're buying a mobile home and then all bets are off, because those are smart contracts and those are horrible. Okay, but you're going to have the ability to do that. Okay, I'm gonna go print. Hold on, please. Stace, I'm gonna print my screen. And I'm gonna put it back in the chat, and you got more friends that have joined, so. Okay. You don't care about that. Yeah, Karen Berman just joined. Hopefully Karen and Jeff are both starting to feel better.
Thank you, Margaret.
We had a bunch of you go down with that flu. We had 3 of you down all at the same time.
I'm about 75% right now, but getting better every day, so.
Good. So you guys in chat should have all the forms. Let me go back to sharing. Okay. All right, so the seller name, right? That seller name should reflect how they own the property. When I'm a buyer's agent, one of the things I will do is I will actually go out to my title company, I use Land Title, and I will pretend to get an O&E. Because they go out to public records and look to see how the name is written. So I will just double check that whatever came over from the listing agent actually mirrors what public records show. Now, if it's a property that recently sold, sometimes the recording stuff, the date is not totally up to date, and so if they don't match, you just call the listing agent, ask the question. Okay? Section 2.4, this is a property. The property is legally described as, this is the most important part, is the legal description. Okay, so you're gonna reflect the county, you're also gonna put in the legal description. Hopefully the listing agent is trained like you guys are and actually use the real legal description and not the truncated one that's available on Realist. If they use the truncated one, you're kind of stuck with it. And then if you have to make a change, an amendment during the process, you do. But try and get the legal description. Land Title used to push those back when you would pretend to go get an O&E, they no longer are. So I used to actually trump what the listing agent had in the listing agreement and actually put the real legal description in. So use your title companies, use the tools that you have access to make sure that's it, right? And then you're also gonna put the street address in there. Okay, but you have to have both.
What do you mean pulling a fake O&E?
I pretend I'm gonna order it, but then right before I have to pay $5, it's already giving me the information. So if I go in and go through the order process, it'll say, oh, the names are Luke Shipley. Yep, that matches. Oh, and here's the legal description. Yep, okay, and I copy and paste, I never paid $5. And by the way, Andrea knows I teach that, and she says it's okay, right? I just think it's helpful, right? You don't have time when you're writing an offer to actually get the $5 O&E back, nor do I encourage that. If you want to, you can, but at least it's a tool to double check what the listing agent is providing you. Okay, all right. Inclusions, these are the things that are coming with the property. Okay, so in section 251, it goes through the whole laundry list thing. It talks about intercom systems and built-in kitchens and sprinkler systems and blah, 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 blah. And then it says garage door openers, including blank remote controls. Somewhere in the world, somebody is teaching the word any. Is any specific?
No.
No. You want to put a specific number of garage remotes in there. So you're all gonna go, well, Margaret, I'm the buyer's agent, I don't know. Put something. You could ask your buyer, well, how many garage remotes would you expect them to give you for this house that's a one-room garage? Possibly, although mine has 2. I got 2 remotes with it. So my guiding principle, if I don't want to talk to my buyer about it, is however many garage spaces they are, that's how many I ask for. So if it's a 1-car garage, I'm asking for 1. If it's a 3, I'm asking for 3. And then if they don't have that many, I'm going to force them to counter it. Now on the listing side, you want to know how many remotes your client has. So you might have to do a counter, right? Margaret might ask for 3, but the reality is we only have 2. You counter that. However, I will tell you, I made a mistake in December, and I assumed when my client who had some memory issues told me that she had 2 garage remotes, I believed her. There weren't any. Did you know that you can buy some really inexpensive universal ones and program them yourself as the listing agent? Or you have your handyman or your stager or whoever go down and just, Stacy did it for me, because she won't let me climb on ladders for probably a good reason. So there's always a way of solving it, then you can fix it in the contract, right? Because at the end of the day, what rules the final decision? What's in the contract? So be specific, and he's not specific. Solar panels, water softeners, and security systems, and satellite systems. These are items that are owned or they have a monthly payment on that goes towards a loan. Satellite systems, I told David the other day, I said, would you please take that out of the contract to buy and sell? They don't exist anymore. Okay, if they're getting satellite and there's this little baby satellite up on their roof from who's the provider now? Dish, EchoStar, I don't know who the providers are. That's a leased service. They don't own that dish. Okay, I see a lot of people checking security systems They don't own the security system. They pay for a service through Xfinity or ADT. Those are not owned systems. You do have people who are buying solar panels, and solar panels can be handled one of three ways. There's a loan, actually four. They could pay for them outright. If that's the case, you would check satellite, you would check solar. If they're making a payment on a loan, you check it in this box. If it's a power purchase agreement or a lease, it does not go in 251. So if this was a listing class, I would be hammering that home that you as listing agents need to understand all about the solar panels before you can go to market.
What's the last one, purchase payment plan?
Power purchase agreement, by the way, that's all over Candelas.
Yeah, so then, like, I walked dogs for this other house in Candelas and they bought all these extra solar panels for their house. But I don't know if they have the normal ones that we all have.
Or they might have both.
Yeah.
They might have part of those panels on a power purchase agreement, and then the ones that they added to it to get a higher level of efficiency might be either they own it outright or they're got payment on it, or who knows. That's why you have to ask a gazillion questions about solar. If you guys don't have, if you're a buyer's agent and you're writing an offer and you know it has solar, I would be drilling that listing agent like there's no tomorrow.
What if they don't know?
Well, I will say, do you have a copy of any of the agreements? And if they say no, then I'm going to, whatever they told me, I'm gonna assume to be correct. And then in my due diligence documents, I'm gonna require the solar documents. And I'm gonna make sure, by the time we get to those due diligence deadlines, I have them. And if they told me it was on a loan and it really was a power purchase agreement or a lease, I'm gonna do an amendment to the contract and fix it. Okay? I hate solar panels. Luke, how do you feel about solar panels? He hates them. We had a nightmare on one of those.
Still going on there.
And it's still going on. Still
I
going on. Post closing. We closed what, the end of December on that?
have a question.
Okay.
So you check it at what point? When it's what? Do you check the box?
If it's owned outright or they're making a loan payment, you check the solar system in 251. We're gonna come down this contract a little bit farther, and we're gonna talk about leases and power purchase agreements. Okay? Same thing with water softeners. A lot of people own their water softeners outright, but some people do have payment plans on them that are either a lease or a payment plan, like on a loan. And why is that important when you're buying it? Well, is the loan gonna be paid off at closing, or is your client gonna have to assume it? These are all things your lender's gonna be asking, you need to understand as the buyer's agent, right? Because if they're on a loan that they're gonna assume, that's gonna play a factor into their debt to income ratio with their lender. And there's gonna be paperwork that you're gonna have them do early in the process so that the solar company gets them approved to take over the payments. And that's true on a loan or a lease. So there's a lot of other things with solar. This is why you gotta drill it to the ground, to use Kevin's phrase, early in the process when you're dealing with solar. Okay?
Margaret?
Yeah.
What if you have a client who wants the house but doesn't wanna take over those payments and say, I want the solar removed? Has anyone, is that like a thing?
Yes and no, because the contract may not allow them to be removed. Okay, if that's the case, that my client's like, I don't wanna take over the payments, then I'm just gonna write the offer so that they get paid off by closing and they get the benefit of the solar panels. And then they can turn them off if they want to.
Okay.
But again, it's depending on how it's written with the solar company as to what you can and can't do. It might be cheaper for the seller to just pay off the loan than it is to pay off the loan and have them removed.
Right, yeah.
Most people want the solar, they just don't want to pay for it. Because it's the green thing to do, okay? Questions? You probably know if any of my friends called me and said, hey, I was thinking to put solar in my house, but we're gonna sell it in about 3 years, what do you think? You may not guess what I would tell them. Don't, don't, okay? Inclusion's not attached. This just talks about your storm windows, your shades, your screens, your window coverings, your curtain rods, all of those things. Other inclusions. Oh, I got the wrong form up. This is what drives me crazy. Here we go. Here's all Margaret's cheat sheets. Okay. Refrigerator, stove, oven, range, dishwasher, microwave, washer, dryer. Garbage disposal. That's my hot button. We have had more problems with garbage disposal. Luke had one yesterday. Stacy had two in her last two closings. So listing agents, make sure you know, is there a garbage disposal in that house or not? Please don't assume they are, because not all of them do. We had it right in the listing paperwork, we had it right in the MLS, the buyer's agent put in a disposal, even though we didn't say there was one in the MLS, we missed it, we didn't counter it, and they wanted the garbage disposal last night. Refrigerator, sometimes you have houses that have more than one, where is it located? Are you getting the refrigerator that's in the kitchen? Oh wait, are you also getting the refrigerator that's in the garage? Are you getting the chest freezer that's in the laundry room? Are you getting the wine fridge? Are you, like, be specific? I did a little homework, because this is my pet peeve, and some of you are not gonna be surprised to hear this. Elena's like going, I know this one because she makes me look for it when she's helping me with contracts. There's this thing in a kitchen that we cook with. And the top of it has these round things. And when you turn a button, you can boil water. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Okay? And sometimes that unit is attached to a big thing, and sometimes it's by itself. Everybody got that? If it's by itself, it's called a cooktop. Okay? It's a cooktop. David, I actually did this research this morning in preparation for this call. Okay, because in my template, you see I have written stove/oven/range, and that comes back from back in 2015, how we disclosed into the MLS if it was that single unit. Okay, now this other thing you can cook with is the square box, and you turn it on and it heats up, and you can bake a birthday cake in it, or a turkey. What's that called? An oven. And sometimes they're in the wall and they're a separate unit, right? So if you have a cooktop and an oven, and they're two separate units, you would have cooktop, comma, oven. Because the comma indicates the number of items. My grandmother, who was an English teacher, is so proud of me right now. Okay? Here's the deal. Sometimes if those two things are in one unit, right? That's what it is in my house. The top of it, I turn it on, I boil water, and then the other part, I cook pizza. What's that called? Called a range. Really? I looked it up on Home Depot today. I took
Stove oven,
huh?
stove oven.
But we don't have to do that anymore, Casey, so this is now how I want you to do it. Because I
Oh, come on.
do stove/oven/range, which by the way, you can still do. However, according to Dr. Google, and by the way, this came directly off of Whirlpool's website. So I think Whirlpool might have a little bit to do with appliances. So I feel like their definitions are pretty good. Right, you with me? A range is a 2-in-1 appliance with the oven and cooktop combined. So you can still do stove/oven/range, or you can just type in range. I'm not going to correct you either way. What I will correct is if I go look at the pictures and I see a single unit item and you've got cooktop/comma range, I'm gonna get you. Okay, because then you're telling me there's two items, and guess what? You don't want the problem that Luke had last night at 5 to 5 about buyer doesn't want to close because we're missing a piece. Okay, I'm doing this for you guys' protection. Okay, so a range is the 2-in-1. A wall oven is its own cooking appliance that can be built into your wall space and placed separately from your cooktop. Okay, so I'm going to change my template, and my template's going to read cooktop, comma, wall oven, comma, range. So in my template, my brain's going to say, what do I have? Oh, I've got a single unit item. I'm going to remove the cooktop and the wall oven, right? But if they have those two separate, then I'll remove range. Does this make sense, or did I just confuse all of you beyond repair?
No.
Is stove ever the right answer then?
Stove is no longer the right answer according to Google.
I have a cooktop, and I didn't know that's what it was called, I've been calling it a range this whole time.
And you have a wall oven?
It's below, so our house is little, but we have, it's not, I guess it's a wall oven, but it's not, it's like on the ground, if that makes sense, it's like,
It's separate. You
It's-
could
but
pull
they
one
are
piece out and leave the other one
Yes.
behind. Yes,
yes.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then we have our microwave attached to our oven. So is that a single unit? Microwave.
It's
oven?
totally attached to the oven, or is it above where the exhaust fan is?
It's above, but I think it'd be weird to, maybe you could just do one.
I think you
Here's
can
what I'm
separate the
asking.
microwave, like if you wanted to remove the microwave, it would be separate microwave.
If the microwave fails, can Andreas replace the microwave alone without replacing the range below?
Yes.
Then it's a separate unit.
Separate unit. Cause there are some wall ovens that have if they're a combo unit with the microwave.
Yes.
We've installed them. So some of them are combo, but some of them, sometimes they place them together, but they're separate places.
Okay? That had been bothering me for a really long time, so what do I do when I wake up at 4:30 in the morning? I do research on what's the difference. But you all win. Right? Because now you guys are smarter when it comes to doing your contracts.
So I have a question.
Okay, hold on. And you dang well better fix this stuff when you're the listing agent with counter offers when they get it wrong. Go ahead, Casey.
Let's complicate it a little more. Do you have to specify what kind of oven it is?
I don't.
Okay.
You could put gas, you could put electric, like you absolutely could. You could even like on the refrigerator, you could put stainless refrigerator, right? I mean, you can. Here's the other thing about this, is that, and this is not my story, my previous coach tells this story all the time. When you are in an upper end house, is there a difference between Sears scratch and dent and Thermador? Just a little bit, right?
I could speak to that one too. That's a pain in the butt when you buy a house with fancy stuff.
Okay, but people do, right? And so when your buyers go out and look at properties where you start seeing the appliances saying Thermador, Wolf, all those upper end stuff. I want you to take a minute and go down and if nothing else, at least write the name of the brand. Okay, and here's why. So this was $1 million plus property prior to 2014. So this was probably a pretty nice house, right? And when the buyers went and looked at the house, it had all of that, Thermador, Wolf, all the upper end stuff. They went and did the pre-close walkthrough 2 days before closing, mistake number one. And they were all there. They went to closing. They got the keys at closing. Sellers now moved out. There was still a refrigerator from Sears scratching it. So what do you think the buyer thought? What do you think happened? Stacy and Elena cannot tell, because I know they heard this.
Collusion.
Maybe collusion, but what is, how do you, so first of all, who wants to be buyer's agent that just got that phone call? Yeah, right? What do you think happened?
They were pissed that it wasn't the same.
They were a little angry, yeah, what else? I'll tell you what happened, the buyer's agent went out and bought them Wolf and Thermador. They paid more money to replace the appliances than they got in commissions. Because they weren't specific enough. If it would have said Thermador, Wolf, and all the items, would they have had an ammunition to go back to the seller?
Yep.
Yeah.
But when you write generic, like I have here in my template, refrigerator, kitchen, did they leave them a refrigerator in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Sure did. So the seller did their job. Now, was it ethical?
No.
Probably not, but contractually they fulfilled their obligation. I don't want any of you buying fancy appliances unless you're putting them in your own houses. Okay? So you wanna be specific. By the way, when I review contracts, I don't just look at the contract. How do you think I know? I go pull up the MLS and I look at the pictures. There was one of you guys just this last weekend, I'm like, was it you on that property? I'm like, is that a one unit or is that a separate cooktop and oven? Because I couldn't tell. And because Jen had been in the house, she was able to say, oh, they're two separate units. And I'm like, okay, then this is how we need to show it. I go look. I look to see, are there washers and dryers? Okay? So this is what my template looks like. Again, it helps my brain. Then you'll notice the second line says swim spa and pool table at no value. Sometimes the sellers will leave things behind. Okay? They'll leave a hot tub, they'll leave a swim spa, they don't wanna move the pool table. If you put that on the same line as the washer and the dryer, your lenders are probably going to push back on you and say, right before closing, hey, can you do an amend and remove the hot tub off of there, because we don't finance hot tubs, swim spas, and pool tables. So by making it its own line item in the contract to buy and sell, and writing the words of no value, you have eliminated 95% of the last minute underwriting scrambles for your buyers. I remember when I helped Arden's parents buy their current house, there was a swim spot on it, and I wrote that in there, and we had no problems. We got to the closing table and the closer goes, wow, Margaret, do you know how many times we never see that until there's an amendment and then the swim spa just disappears? So I'm telling you, make yourself look more elevated in understanding the things that are gonna come from us down the road. Okay, questions on that? All right. There's a disclosure here about home warranty, Mr. Buyer. There are home warranties that are out there and available that you can purchase. We might ask the seller to buy one. I just want you to be aware, at this point, let's not make that decision until we get to the inspection. That is how I explain it to them. I have to be really honest, and I know this is being recorded, and I'm still gonna be really honest because I don't care. I hate home warranties. I hate them. Because they are so vague, they are so many hoops and hurdles for the client who's getting the home warranty. A week ago, I went to a rosary for an old neighbor, and I ran into the mom of one of the clients that Stacy and I helped close a house and get it going through. And I leaned over to the mom and said, so how's your daughter loving her house? Oh my goodness, did I get an earful about the home warranty? And right now, I'm still fighting with the home warranty company on behalf of that buyer. Do I use them? I do. I like to use them when I'm on the seller side to make inspection items go away. For my buyers, I tell them, they're gonna fight you. Like if you put in a claim, we're gonna be fighting them. So when a seller offers one to us in lieu of inspection items, I'm probably gonna start pushing back even harder and go, no, that's not acceptable. Because this young lady believed that if her furnace or air conditioning failed, that they would help offset that by about $1,500 a piece. Ask me how much they gave her. Nothing. And one of the reasons that they wouldn't do something is because, well, whoever did this hooked it up wrong. Do you know who hooked it up?
So,
The company that the warranty company sent out there to fix something. So their people didn't hook something up right and then voided the warranty. Yeah, I'm a little miffed.
yeah,
Right? So I'm just being really honest with, I'm not a fan, but boy, do I use them when I'm on the seller side. Okay? And it's not that they're all bad, just know that they're as good as the rep that sells them. And it seems to be anymore, that's a revolving door.
I have
Anyway.
a question on that.
Okay,
So then what happens if you have like a furnace that's 25 years old? And you're putting an offer on a house with the furnace being that old? Like as the buyer's agent, how would you say to your client, like, you know, this furnace is getting towards the end of its life, you know, would you accept a home warranty in that kind of situation?
so it depends, so you're not gonna, at the time of offer, you're probably not gonna be in that situation. Right, that's when you're negotiating the inspection and you're writing the objection. If I'm writing the objection on a 25-year-old furnace as a buyer's agent, I'm gonna talk to my buyer, I'm probably gonna try and get a full replacement, right? And I'm probably gonna get a no. And so my conversation with my buyer would be, okay, Jen, so here's the situation. We know the furnace is old, and the reality is, it could last another 10 years, or it might last like 2 days after closing, we don't know. Couple ways we can attack this with the inspection objection. We can ask the seller to replace it, which is probably where I would start. They're probably gonna push back on us. So I want you to spend some time thinking about, in the anticipation of them pushing back on us, we can ask for a home warranty. We can pick the home warranty company, and I do have one that I like, although I gotta tell you, none of them are wonderful. They help. They're only gonna offset by maybe $1,500, but some of them have these clauses in that they won't pay towards the replacement, but they'll give you the money for whatever it would be to repair the item, even though the part isn't even available anymore. So you may get nothing out of that, or you may get $1,500. Who knows if that should happen to arise? We could ask for a home warranty. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they come back at us with. Or maybe what we do is we say, you know what, a new furnace is X amount of money. And you guys can call HVAC companies, they're gonna tell you about what it's gonna be, right? They all know what a furnace is, they all know what air conditioning costs, right? A ballpark. Or we might just ask for some additional concessions, which means that reduces the amount of money you have to bring to closing, and you could take that, you know, whatever we get, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, and put that in a savings account, so that in the event something fails, you've got at least a good portion of it saved. That's how I would talk to my buyers in today's environment. Okay? All right. Oh my goodness, we're an hour in and we are in section 255. 255 encumbered conclusions. These are the items that have a loan against them. So you'll notice my little question mark says solar panels, question mark, water softener, question mark. So if the solar panels up above that you checked have a loan, you're going to put in 255 that the solar panels have a loan against them. And you may or may not know who the loan company is. You may know the balance, you may not know, but you're gonna put that there. Okay? And then you're going to check the buyer will or will not assume those payments. That is a very important box. Here's Margaret's best practice. Whether you have a solar panel, water softener, or any of it, I am always checking the will not box. In case something magically appears after we go under contract, that, oh, they have a loan against this, and guess what? You get to take it over. Well, no, I put in the box, will not. So if something pops, I've protected my client. Okay? Section 257, this is where you're going to put the parking facilities. So you're going to describe a 2-car attached garage, 2-car detached garage. If there's multiple, a carport and a garage, you're going to show both of them there. Then the second half of that is any storage sheds. I also put greenhouses there. Like if there's a greenhouse out back, the gardeners. And then in 258, lease items. What has a lease against it? Potentially solar panels and water softeners. So if there's a lease, you're gonna put it there. What's the item? The solar panels, and then will or will not your client assume payments? Even if there's nothing that you know of at the time you're writing the offer, check the will not box. Protect your buyers always. Okay? Solar power panels, power plant. So in a purchase plan, the owner of the house it doesn't own or lease the panels. The panels are actually owned by the solar company. The resident of the home pays the solar company a monthly fee for those solar panels to be up there. And then whatever that solar panel produces is sent to Excel and it offsets their monthly bill. Power purchase agreements, pretty much, you guys, like if you're doing houses out in Candelas or any Lennar properties, because Lennar for a long time was putting solar on everything. Are they still, Stacy? You sold a Lennar last year. Are they still doing solar?
Yeah.
Those are pretty much the power purchase plans. You're not gonna be able to there's no way for the seller to pay it off. So your buyer just has to know they're gonna get that, but it just offsets their Excel bill. right? So you're probably not gonna check the will not in the power purchase plan. You're just not gonna have that option. Okay? All right, exclusion, what items are not staying behind? I always put seller's personal property and I always put staging units. You might see the washer and dryer here. You might see the garage refrigerator, you might see the freezer, right? Whatever items the seller is taking, you wanna put there. Here's the other thing, if you're working with a buyer and you look at the washer and dryer and they are a piece of junk and they're down in a basement and they are going to be no fun to get out of there. Even if they said in the MLS they're included, can you exclude them? All day long. And if the seller signs it, guess what? It gets to get that stuff out of there for you. So if there's things you don't want, make the seller get rid of it. Okay? Water and well rights, here's what I'm gonna say, if you have a property that has water and well rights, call me, call Bob, I have, still, there's a class that Damien teaches on this that I really wanna take. Water rights are transferred separately, now if it's just a well, right, if there's just a well, in section 273, you're gonna check that box and you're gonna put the well permit number on it. If the listing agent didn't show you the well permit number in the MLS and they claim they don't know what it is, you can actually go out to the Colorado Division of Water website and you can find it yourselves. Okay? But if you are in Wheat Ridge and you've got ditch rights, you also find some of that a little bit in Edgewater and Old Arvada. You might find some ditch rights. If you run across that, call us. The other thing that you can find in Wheat Ridge and also in parts of Lakewood is if the water provider is consolidated water, oftentimes whenever the real estate transfers, there's automatically 5 shares of consolidated water that comes with it. So if you find out in the offer process that the water provider is consolidated, so we're asking these questions, and you would show those in 274. Okay? All right. Dates and deadlines. Ooh, baby. I teach an entire skills lab on dates and deadlines. I'm not gonna do it here. However, I also included for all of you this other document. This is my favorite document. And I know it doesn't say land title, but this one's better than land titles. Easier to understand. You'll notice that, so I want to talk about one of those, time of day deadline. Per the contract, what's the deadline?
7:59.
AM or PM?
PM.
PM, midnight, okay? So if you leave time of day deadline blank, that's your deadline. Now, they moved this forward because agents really don't like negotiating at 11:45 PM at night. So what they started doing is they added this line where you can put in a time. And they have in here anywhere from 5 to 7 PM. I don't like that time, by the way. That sounds great. Let's do 5 PM. What if your client is a basketball coach, Jamie?
That's just not gonna work.
It's just not gonna work. You're a dual career agent. You're not delivering today? Oh, you are?
After this, yeah.
Okay, well, let me just do this. What time do you get done delivering?
Today, like 10:30.
Tonight?
Yeah.
So if I put a deadline at 7 o'clock in your contract, how you gonna do on that? Ain't gonna happen. I will tell you this. My preference is leave it blank. And manage your business so that you're not up to 11:45 PM managing contracts. I have never been up on a contract that I wrote or that I was the listing agent on past the hour of 9 o'clock negotiating. I've been up on some of yours. Okay? If you're going to put a deadline in there, please don't make it 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Let's be real. Right? At least make it 8:30, 9 o'clock, something like that. And then if you do that, make sure you remember that you did that. We had an agent, true story. If he was here, he would raise his hand, but I still won't tell you who it is. He had in his contract 8 o'clock at night. Like you, I always get home till later than that. wrote an inspection objection for his buyer. Buyer signed it. And he sent it at 8:37 PM. Listing agent called and said, what do you think the listing agent called and said? You missed your deadline, sorry, we're not going to fix any of those items in inspection time. You snooze, you lose. Now. The listing agent was like if you were writing an offer for Stacy. Okay, so when Stacy lists a property, we're both on it, right, because we're a team. Margaret, the big mad, bad, mean agent, called up that poor new buyer's broker and said, you missed your deadline, too bad for you. Buyer's agent got a phone call from nice, sweet Stacy, who said, hey, I saw that it came in. None of this is really big. Let me talk to my seller and see what they want to do. Technically, we don't have to do anything, but let me see. Seller agreed to do it all. Yeah, lucky. Because if you would have stayed with me, you would have gotten nothing. I would have talked to my seller about it, but I would have told him you don't have to do it. Isn't that what you would have done? You would have said, snooze, you lose, dude. Unless it's something like smoke alarms or carbon dioxide flood, right? But I would have said, too bad, you missed your deadline, right? When you miss a deadline, what I told this agent was, who do you think is gonna take care of this for the buyer now? Same person that paid for the luxury appliances. You screwed up. How do you think you fix your screw ups in real estate? Okay. And trust me, we all have. I have. A couple of times. Had one last year, it cost me $1,300. Part of that. So I tell you these things to help you, so you don't have to spend money. I just want you to know at some point you will, just make sure it's not durable appliances. Okay, questions on the data deadline? Okay, so all these other deadlines, I'm not going through them, but this gives you ideas, like alternative earnest money says 1 to 3 days from MEC. Record title association, all of that. If you don't have the deadline in the contracts, leave it blank. Don't fill it out. If you want more information on this, go out to the YouTube channel, watch the Skills Lab. There's probably 2 or 3 Skills Lab recording when I teach how to do this. It's on the calendar again for this year on Skills Lab. So we've got the data there, but use these to help you do your dates and deadlines. For those of you that have written offers, how helpful is this?
This one, I like the YouTube class on it.
Yeah,
Great, the recording.
but the deadlines literally came from this document. Like when I talk you through them, it's like this, and then I teach a half in CPM. Okay, which actually works too sometimes. All right, so we're gonna skip all this. One thing I am gonna write on possession time. If they're taking possession the day of closing, please make sure you're using this language capitalized the way it is, because it's a proper noun. And they're defined terms in the contract. So if they're taking possession the same day as closing, it's upon delivery of deed and good funds. If it's a mobile home in a park, it's upon delivery of certificate of title and good funds. If the possession date is after closing, and you're using a post-closing occupancy agreement, which by the way, you're to do, even if it's 1 day after closing, you should do a post-closing occupancy agreement. We're not cover that today, we're not gonna sign. Okay, but then you would put the possession date. So if I was closing today to 5, and they were gonna give possession on 2/20, what time on 2/21? 8 AM, noon, 3 PM, 11:59 PM, what's the time that the new buyer gets to walk in the front door? Okay,
Do they still receive keys? at
great
closing,
question.
Or is it,
Yes, so whenever you have post-closing occupancy agreement, the buyer just became the owner, which made them the landlord, they should have a key, they should have access to it. Now, they can't just walk in the door anytime. Right, and there's terms of that in the post-closing occupancy agreement, but yes. They should have keys or at least a way to access it. Now, we've had problems with some agents who have gotten downright nasty about it. And so we had to come to other terms. I mean, Stacy, didn't you have to get Damien involved in that when that happened?
Early on, that was 2015, yeah.
Yeah, but, they literally would not, and so we had to get Damien involved, and the agreement that we came to was that the lockbox would stay on the front door with the key in it, and Stacy had the code, but the owner couldn't have it unless there was an emergency. And then, once the possession time came, then Stacy could give him the lockbox code and give it, and hand him the key. So, there's always ways to figure it out. Usually, Connie, man, you've been in this business very long, it's amazing what happens. Okay? Okay, applicability of term, this just defines what NA means. NA means deleted, means it doesn't apply. It also talks about what the words, MEC stands for, which is mutual execution of this contract, that's when the buyer and seller sign. Okay? In section 3.3.1, it defines a day, it's a 24-hour period, it does define that it's mountain time zone, either standard or daylight, depending on which time of the year you're in. In section 3.5, 3.3.3, man, my eyes are bad. This just says if a deadline were to fall on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday, will the deadline automatically move forward or not? Just always check, Will, just save yourself. I tell you, how many people are missing the fact that February 17th is President's Day? Right now, if you're hard coding your dates, that makes it easy. Where this really comes into play is if you're writing like a backup offer or an investor where they do everything 3 days plus MEC, 6 days plus MEC, well, those things can fall on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, and you can't even control it. So just check the box always so that you don't have a situation like that. There are other holidays that will come down, not as earth shattering as President's Day, but some of the more ones. Kevin always gives the one Cesar Chavez Day. Is that still a day that we shut down part of Denver? Do we know? I don't
So schools aren't out for that day.
Schools aren't out, but I bet you the banks and title companies aren't funding. So there's holidays that they add and take away and add and take away. It's impossible to keep track of. Just because the schools are open doesn't mean that it's not a holiday for the banks and the post office or who knows, right? So by checking will, you just know you're not gonna get caught, okay? Oh, the fun part, money. Okay, if you're using CTM, please don't use commas, periods, anything, just type the numbers, because this does do math for those of you that aren't mathematicians. Okay, so you're gonna put your purchase price in, this is your offer amount. Then you're gonna show the earnest money. If they're getting a loan, you're gonna show the new loan amount, and then the system will automatically calculate the cash at closing, and clearly mine is broken. No, it's not. We're only doing a $20,000 loan, it's good. Wait a minute, is that right? That is. Okay, so how do you calculate the loan? Well, one, you could ask the lender. Right? In this case, they're not getting a very big loan, they have lots of money. Okay, I don't know why I made up those numbers, they're kind of not real. But usually you're dealing with somebody and you know as the agent, oh, they're putting 10% down, or they're putting 5% down, right? Isn't that what you normally know? Right? You know that more than you know, oh, well, their loan's gonna be 80% of the purchase price. Right? So here's the thing. If you know they're doing a 10% down, then what's the percent that the loan is of the purchase price? 90. So if your lender doesn't tell you the number, take your purchase price times 0.9 and that's your loan amount. If they're putting 3% down, then it's 97%. Right? All right, seller concessions. This is where you put the amount of money that the seller is going to help your buyer with their closing costs and or rate buydowns. You do not have to say, well, they're gonna do 10,000 for rate buydowns and 4,000 for other costs. It's just a total. Concessions, make sure that you are very tightly aligned with your lender partner. Make sure that you're not asking for more in concessions than they have in expenses. Because if you do, your buyer's gonna leave money on the table because concessions cannot move towards the down payment. They can only go against pure costs. Now, are there ways that we can add costs? Oh my God, yes. Let's prepay 12 months of HOA, right? Let's pay 2 years of property insurance instead of one. Like, there's ways to use the money, but you need your lender partners to help you with that. And here's the thing, you cap out your concessions when you write the offer, When you go into inspection resolution, you don't have any more room. Right? You can't ask for max at the time of offer and then ask for more inspection and then you've done more. True story, when I bought my first house, my agent was horrible, she didn't shut the closing. Fortunately, I've been in lending for a few years, and I was buying the house with my younger brother, who knew nothing. Okay? And we're sitting there, and this was back in the days before we really got the settlement statements. We didn't get the final numbers from our lenders like in CD day, like literally this is what it looked like. This was back in 1986, just to give you a reference. In 1986, it sounded like this. My lender called and said, hey, you need to take a check for blah, 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 to closing. Needs to be a cashier's check. Okay. That's it. That was all I had. All I knew. So we get to the closing table and I'm looking at the documents and I'm going, whoa. We said that we were getting one amount in concessions. Where is it? Well, my realtor didn't talk to my lender. I thought I was getting $10,000 of my closing costs covered, but I only got $8,000 because that's all I had. So she left $2,000 on the table for us. Yeah, like, talk about being a 26-year-old kid and you're going, what's that? So funny story, some of you know my brother. So think about it, he would have been 23, right? And so I'm going back and forth with the agent on the other side. I'm like, I don't care, the contract says we're supposed to have this $10,000, I want the money. And he's like talking to me like I'm an idiot. So finally, I pushed the chair back away from the closing table. I looked at my brother and said, we're out of here. By the way, the U-Haul was in the parking lot. He turned white as a sheet. Can you see him, Stacy, just like going ghost white, right? And I started stepping to the door. Needless to say, we got everything we wanted. We negotiated very quickly at the table. I suddenly had a washer and dryer that I didn't have to pay. And I got possession much quicker than I was supposed to. Moral of the story though is, don't be that buyer's agent. Right? Had she done her job, that wouldn't have happened. On a multitude of them. Okay? All right, earnest money. How are you paying it? Personal check, cashier's check, or wire transfer. Those are your three choices. And then who's gonna hold it? Whatever it says in the MLS. It's usually gonna be a title company. There are still some brokerages that still hold earnest money, like Remax Alliance. I think there still are. Just be aware. And then this just goes through and describes what earnest money does. For those of you that don't know, earnest money is applied at closing towards the down payment and closing costs. So it's not like they lose the money unless they default on the contract by missing a deadline or something. Okay. 4.4 defines good funds. Good funds is verifiable money, and a verifiable money is not only the money itself, but where did it come from? Cash is not good funds. Okay, so if you have a client that has money in the mattress, or they've been tucking money away for their down payment, tell them to get it into the bank now, and then let it sit so they get 2 months worth of bank statements showing in there. Because if they just bring cash, and true story, I had this happen, unbeknownst to me, my client, had mattress money. And so they went and turned in their earnest money and they took the cash to the bank and got a cashier's check. Y'all think that would be reasonable, right? Okay. Well, then when they were going through underwriting goes, well, where in your bank account did you take the earnest money out? Like, where did that money come from? Well, we had it at home, it was cash. They couldn't count it. So we literally had to have the parents wire transfer money to the title company. Then the title company refunded the original earnest money so that the earnest money paid was traceable. So when you're talking to your buyers, be talking to them about earnest money early. Okay, you can use gifts for earnest money, you just have to know about it up front. Okay. All right, new loan. Okay, oh, this is an important one. 4.43 available funds. Buyer represents that the buyer does or does not have the funds immediately available. This is really important. If your buyer can't buy their house, you can't make the down payment money without selling the house they're in, then the answer is does not. Okay? 1 second, I'll get to you, okay? As a listing agent, I always look at this box because I'm gonna look to see, did they check does or does not? And if they say does not, but I don't have a sales contingency, I'm gonna ask some questions. What do you mean they don't have the money? Now, if they're getting the down payment as a gift, is the money verifiable?
Yes, if there's like a letter.
Yes, it is verifiable based on who's giving the gift. Right? So if Arden was gifting money to Christy, does Arden have the money in the bank? Yes, and is it verifiable? Yes, so it is verifiable funds. If they have their money in mutual funds, is it verifiable? Yes, it is. They have an investment account that they can see it in. Question?
I don't know if it's really about like this specific section, but if like somewhere in the contract, are you able to put that the buyer can buy the property once they sell their house, like where in the contract is that?
So we're gonna get to that, so hold that thought, so it's in section 10, there's the sales contingency, and then up in the dates and deadlines, you have a sale contingency deadline. So we're gonna get to that.
Margaret, what's an example of where you would check does not have funds we need to be verifiable? And does that negate?
Sales contingency,
Okay,
that's about the only time that I would think that would be it.
okay.
Okay,
It'd be nice if that was like in the same section.
what?
That explanation would be in the same section, like the sales contingency, so that you.
I'll let you make that recommendation to Mr. Damon. He'll give you all kinds of reasons why it's not.
So
Once you get really understanding the contract flow, you'll understand why it's not.
So is that, so like if I wanna go, let's say, sell my house tomorrow, and there's a house across the way that I wanna buy. And I'm depending on the equity of my home, that's when I would put does not, because I'm waiting for sales, I have to sell my house in order to get the note.
Exactly. The only other example would be, let's say you were gonna use a HELOC to pull the money out of that. At this point in time, you don't have the money because that HELOC may not be approved. Right?
Who's verifying it? If the buyer says they have it, is the agent verifying this, or are they?
Question.
Something that says.
Okay, so if it's a substantial amount of down payment, like the 400,000 I have in my offer, I'm gonna get a pre-approval letter from a lender. And when it's a $400,000 cash, where it's like significant amount, I'm gonna call the buyer's agent, and say, can you send me over proof of funds? So your proof of funds is gonna be a bank statement or something like that. Now, if it's a small amount, like if they're doing a 5 or 10% down, here's my other thing, as a listing agent, I will call the lender, right? I wanna talk to the buyer's lender, right? One of my questions when I talk to the buyer's lender is, Mr. Lender, I'm showing that they're bringing to the closing table an additional $18,000 towards the down payment. Have you verified that they have that available? Yeah. If it's a large sum like 400,000, I wanna see the bank statement. If it's, a small amount in relativity, and you all get to choose what's relative, right? On your $55,000 one, 20,000 could be relative, right? But if I'm selling $1 million property in Candelas, 20,000 is like, whatever, right? So that's how you can ask for proof of funds. If you are doing a cash only buyer, you absolutely want to attach proof of funds with the offer. Okay? That clear that up good?
Yeah.
All right. If they're getting a loan, what kind of loan are they getting? You notice I have all three of them checked. It's just a trigger point. I unchecked the ones that don't apply. In 453. 456. You're typically not going to use this. You're typically going to hide it unless the buyer is assuming the seller's loan. If you are dealing with a loan assumption, you better get me and Bob on the phone. Start with me and then I'll pull Bob in. Okay? Most of the time you're going to hide it. Okay?
You don't wanna like tell them about it, or you can hide it, like.
So if the section doesn't apply, you can just hide it so the contract gets smaller in terms, so you don't have, so instead of it looking like this, that whole section just gets deleted out of the contract, because it doesn't apply. Okay? In section 4.7 is the same thing. If you have a scenario where there's any kind of seller or private financing, you would fill out this section. Again, if you're playing in that arena, get with your coach or your managing broker. You guys are all with, everybody here is in coaching, so just call me. Okay?
And back up for 1 second,
Mhm.
I know loan limitations, just 'cause I have like a condo townhome I'm looking at selling now. And how do you know, as far as FHA more so, if they qualify to offer that to the FHA?
So how do you know if the property qualifies?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the question. So the question is, as a listing agent, how do I know if the property is going to meet the standards for FHA or VA financing? Twofold. One, if the house has peeling paint, missing handrails, trip hazards, broken windows, it's not gonna qualify. So either get your seller to fix them, or you're only gonna be offering conventional and cash. If you're dealing in condos and townhomes, some are approved, some are not approved. You could go to the websites, like you Google FHA condo approval, and you could look it up. Hey Mitch, I got this house that I'm putting on the market, can you verify it's FHA approved? Can you verify it's VA approved? Work with your lenders, right? Because those websites aren't necessarily the easiest to fight your way through. We do it once in a blue moon, they do it multiple times a week. So get your lender partner to help you identify that up front. If you're playing in condos, and I know this isn't a listing cost, but I can't stop myself. If you are listing condos right now are very difficult to sell. Many of them are not even qualifying for conventional loans. The reason why is that, for those of you that own homes, what did your property insurance do? It went way up, right? So did the HOAs, right? So what some HOAs chose to do, instead of increasing the monthly HOA fees to the community, they changed the wind and hail deductible from 5% to 10%. The minute they took it from 5% to 10%, they're no longer eligible for a government-backed conventional loan. Which means now you're dealing with a non-warrantable loan. Non-warrantable loans are 20 to 25% down, and usually at least 1% higher in interest rate. And not all lenders will offer them. So as listing agents, find out before you put it on the market. Because why do you think we're having all these condos terminate? Because somebody didn't do their homework. And underwriting goes, this doesn't qualify, the wind and hail, they finally get the master policy, right? Like 10 days before closing, and underwriting goes, this doesn't qualify, we can't do this loan. By now, the buyer has spent money on inspection, they paid money for an appraisal, and now they can't get the loan because the condo is not warrantable. Does a listing agent do your homework? Right, make sense? Okay. Your lender partners are huge helps in this, no matter which side you're on. Okay, transaction provisions, number 5, it's all about financing. It defines to you the definition between loan terms and loan availability. The loan terms deadline is the one that says, does the buyer find the loan terms acceptable? Are they comfortable with the interest rate? Are they comfortable with the payment? It's not about whether they can get approved or not. It's about, are they comfortable with the terms? That should normally be able to be figured out within the first 10 days. Okay. Loan availability comes down to, will they get approved? And even if you have a pre-approval letter, there's no guarantees. Things come out of the woodwork. Okay. Section 5.3 about credit information. You do not need to, again, this is another section you can hide. If you read the first sentence, it says, this contract is conditional upon seller's approval of buyer's financial ability and credit worthiness, which means that the buyer needs to give their credit information to the seller. You would only do that if what? In a traditional loan, would the seller ever get the buyer's credit information? No, so hide it. The only time you're going to use that section is if they're assuming a loan or they're doing seller financing.
How do you hide a section?
So when you're in CTM, this little box,
Oh, okay.
check that, and it won't appear. Okay.
you'll still see it, it won't appear on the print or signed versions for your grants.
It won't, like, this is the PDF version I have up here, if I would have hid that, you wouldn't see it.
Right.
But obviously, I want you guys to see everything for the purpose of this class, so I unhid everything.
Right.
Okay? Same thing with existing loan review. The buyer doesn't need to review an existing loan unless they're assuming one. So hide it. It's just, and if you don't, it's okay. It just makes your offer cleaner. And the cleaner the offer, how much stronger do you look? Plus, it's a lot easier for Elena and I to review contracts, so we don't have to look through stuff that doesn't apply. We're selfish that way. Okay, section 5.5, buyer representation of personal residence. This is a place where they actually move this forward in the contract. This is where if you have an investor who's buying a property, either as a fix a flip or some kind of rental property, and they're not gonna live in it, then you're going to check that box that represents that they will not occupy it as their primary residence. If you're working with a buyer who's gonna buy their own house, then you don't need to worry about that. Okay? All right, appraisal, section 6. How are we doing? Is this, you guys feeling like you know a little more than you do when you walked in the door?
Yes.
All right, let's see if we can make it in 35 minutes. Okay, appraisal definitions. What is an appraisal? All of these definitions are here. This is what I'm gonna tell you. Go read it. Please go read these things. Okay? The seller, buyer has the right to terminate if the appraisal comes back and it's either not at value or they have conditions on it. When would you have an appraisal with conditions? Peel and paint, missing carbon monoxide alarms, missing smoke alarms. Okay, trip hazards. I had one time that they had to have the debris removed from the crawl space. You know what the debris was?
Yeah.
A cooler. And you know what? The seller had to go down and take the cooler out, which they were going to do before closing anyway. And then the buyer had to pay for the appraiser to go back out there and confirm that it had been removed. Did you hear who had to pay for it? Somebody I was working with. We were talking about inspections and they found in the inspection missing carbon monoxide. You think an appraiser's gonna call that out? I said, you tell that listing agent to go get those carbon monoxide alarms in before the appraiser gets out there, because it is dumb for your buyer to pay $150 or $200 for the appraiser to go back out there to verify their install. Get it done early. Listing agents, get it done before you go on market. Okay, there's so many things that if you do your homework up front, your transactions go so much more smoothly. Okay. FHA, if you have an FHA loan, there is a clause here that says that the appraisal has to meet a certain dollar amount, and it triggers you, it puts a dollar sign there, so we wanna write in a dollar amount. What I want you to do instead is to write the word, capitalize the way I have it, because it's a proper noun defined in the contract, purchase price. Because here's what happens. You offer 600,000, say you get a counter offer for 625 and nobody fixes this section. Keep it simple, right? Because then you're gonna have a big old fight. House doesn't appraise at 625. Okay? Who pays for the appraisal? Obviously, everything's negotiable in real estate. We know that. Typically, in this case, it's gonna be the buyer, because who benefits from the appraisal? Buyer, right? I had a lender in here earlier today talking to one of my clients. Appraisals are between $800 and $850, and that's without a rush fee right now. Woo, stuff. Man, I remember when they were $250. I'm old. Okay, HOA. If you have a property that's got a homeowners association, this goes through all the stuff about what an HOA is. It's going to go through all the documents that the seller needs to provide to the buyer. I am not going to read this to you. You guys need to read it. Okay. And the fact in 7.4 that the buyer has the right to review them. Okay. Here's a conversation I have with my buyer. Okay, Tisha, so when we get the HOA docs in, I'm gonna want you to take a look at them and make sure that these are rules that you are comfortable with. Right? And sometimes you'll find things in there like, well, let's just use an example. No dogs heavier than 60 pounds. and you just adopted a Saint Bernard puppy. Are you gonna have a problem if we found an HOA like that? You would. So you wanna make sure that you have time, you wanna look at the documents for that. As a buyer's agent, I don't spend a lot of time going through the rules. That's not my buyer. But what I do look at, not with a high degree, like I'm not reading every line, but I'm glancing at them and I'm looking for flags. Specifically around things that could result in special assessments post-close. Okay, I'm just looking for things to say to my buyer, hey, Luke, did you notice? Hey, did you look at those meeting notes, other than the fact that that one lady from Unit 1A is constantly at the meetings complaining about everything? But other than her, did you notice that they said that they had the insurance company coming out and looking at hail damage? Didn't know if you saw that, that might be something we might want to get some more information on. That's your role in documents, not to tell your buyer what's good and bad, but to be their second set of eyes. Okay, because how many of you guys bought a house? Does it feel like you're drinking from a fire hose? Especially the first one? How did that go, Liz? Well, you got a really good agent, you can have your Shouldn't that be? Okay, all right, title insurance. You have many choices here. Who selects the title insurance company? Ye who selects the title company normally pays for the title insurance. That's the owner's policy. There's two types of title insurance. Take Andrea's classes. You have the owner's policy and then you have the loan policy. When it comes to the owner's policy, it's very customary that the seller selects the title company, which means they pay for the owner's policy. Now, a lot of the investors like to pick their own title companies because they like them for a certain reason, they have a great relationship with them, and they can do things if they're going to flip the houses, that's called a holdover period, which saves them money. So in that case, you might have an investor who says, I want to pick the title company, you know, by the way, I'm going to pay for the title insurance. So it can go both ways, right? So you just check the appropriate box. And you could check buyer selects the title insurance. And then you could go down below and the buyer says, however, we want the seller to pay for it, and you put it in additional provision. So everything's negotiable, but this is pretty standard what I've got here as far as what we see the most frequently. Okay, OEC, that's owner's extended coverage. I highly recommend you always check will. As far as who pays for it, I don't really care. I will never correct this paragraph, this second. My theory is whoever pays for the title insurance pays for the OEC. OEC is less than $100, so it's not like it's a big expense. Some people do a 50-50. I have known buyer brokers that have said, I'll cover the fee. Doesn't matter. I always take the approach, whoever buys the title insurance pays for it. Title documents, copies of it, going through it, it defines on record versus off record. Basically, off record title items are those that have not been recorded, so you can't pick them up in a title search. Tax certificate, who's going to pay for the tax certificate? Again, he who pays for the title insurance, do I have to pay for it? Again, it's like it's under $30. I think it's up to $27 now. Regardless, it's not a big expense. So if your buyer wants to pay it, just put a little more money in the pocket of the seller, go for it. Right? If you find out you're on a bunch of you're competing, sometimes having your buyer pick up the OEC and pick up the title certificate puts a little more money, or tax certificate puts a little more money in the seller's pocket. They may see that as choosing you over somebody else. Okay. Third party rights of purchase. We don't have a lot of those in Colorado. Stop putting in rights of refusals. They don't really exist very often. Title objection. This is the date in which the buyer can say, hey, I'm not comfortable with something that's in here. Man, we just had one of those. Oh, I know why. We just had one where we terminated it because we discovered in the HOA docs, or actually we discovered in the title work, that the property was in a metro district. And we got the tax certificate, and we even told the taxes were less than $2,000 a year, and they were over $6,000 a year. We weren't disclosed that there were 2 HOAs, we were only disclosed that there was 1. That's pretty big misses, right? So the buyer went, wait a minute, that's an extra $400 a month in my payment, I can't afford that, I'm out. As agents, I don't want you being title experts, you are not. I have been working with land title, I was telling title yesterday, I have been a land title customer since 1983. I know title commitments pretty well, but I don't explain them. I know when something looks off. So if your buyer has questions, you need to send it to title. Please take title's company about how to read a title commitment. You guys have so many resources for education outside me, learn from the experts. Okay? If you end up in a situation with oil, gas, water, and that's the disclosure. You will find sometimes in the title work on Schedule B2, you can find some really, if anybody's a history buff, sometimes these are a lot of fun. Back in the good old days, the railroads and some of the other companies would make reservations for minerals and oil and gas, and they would take over, like, I think I saw one that was for the entire state of Colorado, or it was like the southern half of Colorado. And so whenever you get a title commitment, for those of you that haven't seen one yet, there's always hyperlinks to the original documents. I have actually seen documents that have been signed by Ulysses S. Grant and
Wow.
President Taft. Can't read them because back then they wrote in this really fancy cursive writing. For those of you that don't even know how to read, like we've had agents in here, they don't even know how to read cursive. They'll never be able to read those documents, right? But it's so cool to be able to see that history of documents that were signed by. So if you're into like looking at that kind of stuff, it's kind of fun. Okay. Section 9, in the event that you are having mineral or oil rights, they most of the time do not show up in title work. They're probably not transferring with the property, they've probably been stripped from the property because, you know, Joe's long lost heirs from the 1700s, now we've got them, some kids got them. They may not even know they have them, but those all get transferred outside of the regular closing of the property. But if you have a client that wants information on it, they're gonna have to go hire a minerals attorney to go do the research. We don't have the skill set needed this type. It's very rare. You're gonna find it more if you get out into Wells County, out on the plains. But just be aware of it, because you guys are going out there, because that's where we can afford our buyers to buy houses. All right, how we doing, Zoomers? Any questions out there? No, quiet. You're gonna add Christina Kionis on to the list. Okay, I know, I'm sorry. Okay, ILCs and surveys. An ILC stands for Improvement Location Certificate. It's basically a mini survey. I would recommend that unless you're buying a condo or a townhome, that you at least always give your buyer the right to have one. So I check ILC, and then honestly, they're not that expensive. They're under $500. They're part of your due diligence. I would have the buyer order it, and I'd have the buyer pay for it. Now, there are some agents out there who like to do the kumbaya language. And if you want to do that, I can absolutely help you write the clause. But instead of checking that the buyer will order it and pay for it, you could write a clause that says, in the event an ILC or survey is required by the title company, the seller shall order and pay for it. Semicolon, any other ILCs or surveys will be at the buyer's responsibility. I might have written that one a couple times. Okay, you can put that in there. Okay. A lot of buyers, especially buying down here, go, I don't need one, I'm in the city. I don't need one, I'm in the city. I had one not long ago, and it's actually been a while. It was down in Old Inglewood, and it was a property that you had alley access to the garage. Okay, well, the next door neighbor had put in and cemented their driveway to theirs, and at the end, when it got to the alley, it flared. Normal, right? Well, title came back and required an ILC. And, you know, I was a young working agent, I pushed back, why do you need that? What are you seeing that I don't know? And they said, well, they have these tools and they can look down where the property lines are and they can see where things are. And they said, it looks like that driveway is encroaching on the property that your buyer's paying. Okay, so we went and got the ILC, my buyer paid for it, she's happy to do it. And we discovered that where they flared the driveway, it crossed over the property line by 1/4 inch. So Title made that 1 square inch an exception on Schedule B2 that said, we are not going to insure you because of this encroachment on your property, of just this little part. We'll insure everything else, but we're holding this as an exception. My buyer didn't care. Okay? Now, let me tell you about Highlands Ranch. Everybody familiar with Highlands Ranch? Awesome planned community, right? Master planned, just like Layton Rock and Candelas and all the ones up here, right? Well, builders built them. And this buyer, how dare he? He's buying it from the original owner. And this particular buyer says, I want an ILC. And he was buying the middle house in the block. Follow me? There's a couple houses over here, a couple houses over here, and a whole bunch of houses in the back. Good? Well, the ILC came back. Asked me where the property line was. Right in the middle of his house. The entire block had been platted so that every house crossed between 2 property lines. Is that a problem? Because what do we sell? Do we sell an address or do we sell a legal description? Legal description. You may want to know, some of you know the story, so if you know it, don't tell. What happened? A whole lot of lawyers got involved. Because the whole block had to have their houses replatted. And they had to come to an agreement, so they had to go back out and have all of it surveyed. The good news was there were fences. So they just lined everything up with where the fences were, but do you think that's something that can be done in a couple days? No. No. I actually tell that story to my buyers. Because now they go, yeah, that might be worth $500 to know that. Okay. Section 10, this talks about disclosures, inspection rights and all of that, right? So 10.1 talks about that they will receive, hopefully, a property disclosure filled out by the seller that is to indicate what the seller knows. The seller doesn't know it, they can't disclose it. Is that true? Yeah. Talks about adverse material facts. Last time I checked, you know, if a house has spirits in it, that is not an adverse material fact. Although I'm going to be selling one of those houses this spring. I just can't tell you guys which one it is. Thank God I got Gade, so that way you'll never know. And it will be the one that you least expect, I will tell you that. Inspection, your buyer has the right to inspect the property. No one says what they have to inspect. They can inspect however they want and whatever they want. My very first house, my brother did the inspection. On my current house, after I was under contract, Ben came out and looked through it. Not really a full-blown inspection, but at least found out where my water shut off was, because Ben told me, right? Or they can hire a third-party inspector, they can hire someone to test the air, they can do meth tests, they can do radon tests, they can do sewer tests, they can do lead-based paint tests, they can have a structural engineer come out, they can do as many tests and inspections as they want to do by whoever they want.
How much does one cost normally?
Depends on what one of those inspections you're gonna do. So your typical third-party home inspection is based on the size of the home. Bigger the house, the more expensive it is. Oh God, I haven't done one for a while. How much?
I'd say between 5 and 7. So,
Is that just inspection, or does that include the sewer and the radon?
without either of those.
Okay,
Okay, so basic.
yeah,
That's a range of like, about your typical smaller house to the bigger.
Is the sewer inspection where they run the cameras down?
so that's a sewer scope, so that would be an add-on to your typical third party. So so typically what we see most frequently, is you see the third party visual inspection. They're gonna look at the roof, they're gonna check the electrical, they're gonna look at the electrical panel. They're gonna make sure the toilets aren't wobbly, they're gonna make sure that there's no water leaks, they're gonna check the furnace, they're gonna check the HVAC, they're gonna do all this stuff. They're gonna pop their head up in the attic. Okay? They're gonna do a visual. Here's the thing with inspectors. They know a lot, about a lot of things and they're an expert in none. Right? They're going to say things like, this is what I saw, you might wanna have this checked. Your inspectors can be your best friend with your buyers, as long as your inspector isn't an alarmist, or you don't have a crazy mom and dad with a first-time home. If I have a first-time home buyer, I have a couple of inspectors I really like, and if I know I have a first-time home buyer, I let them know before we even get to the property. Hey, this is the first time I bought a house, it's not freaking out. Right? And also the inspectors also are really good at then going the extra mile and explaining things, right? Because you might not, if you've never owned a home, you might not know, blah, blah, blah. Can't even think of an example right now, right? But I'll tell you what, if you own a home, then you kind of know what they're talking about. Okay? They're gonna teach the buyer about how to maintain the home. They're gonna talk about maintenance, they're gonna tell them of areas of concern. If the HVAC is 25 years old, but it's working just great, they're gonna have a conversation about you might need to prepare for this. Okay, then a lot of them will layer on a sewer scope. I highly encourage a sewer scope because it's the one thing you can't see. And depending on how you bundle it, the cost can be relatively inexpensive. Okay, again, you want a sewer guy who's not an alarmist. I actually had a sewer scope guy get fired because it cost me 2 deals because he freaked my client out. Even though 4 other sewer people said, that's fine, I don't know why he's saying that. So I just got it fired. Okay, another one is radon. Right? Radon, if you don't know what it is, it's a gas, it's all over. It's in Colorado, did you know how bad it is in Iowa and Illinois?
No, really?
Yeah, it's worse there. But anyway, I'm kidding. But anyway, it's a gas, it stays low to the ground, okay? So I guess if you're buying a condo that's on the second floor, you probably don't need radon. Right? If you got a house, got a basement or crawl space, I would recommend it. What I tell my clients is I want you to know what radon is, and it's up to you. Right? If you are never gonna be down at that lowest level, and I don't tell them this, but I explain it to you guys. If they're never gonna be down in that basement and they're gonna be living up above, like in a tri-level, maybe they don't need it. I had a tri-level house, unbeknownst to me, back when I bought it, I didn't know about radon. And when they resold it, the people who bought me resold it, and they had the radon tested, and it was pretty high, which meant it's probably high when we lived there. We lived in that family room, right? I don't know, you're gonna die of lung cancer, I don't know. But it's up to your buyers to understand that. And then all the other stuff is just add-on, right? I had one that had super high allergies. They did an air test. They did mold tests. Liz knows about mold tests. Okay? So just talk to your buyers about what their options are, and then they get to choose. Okay? Then inspection termination, if they find things in there and they're like, I don't want this house, they can just straight up terminate. Typically what happens is they will file what's called an inspection objection. That is with the buyer's request for the seller to address the things that they found. If they complete an objection, the inspection termination word goes away. If buyer and seller are unable to come to an agreed upon terms, you don't have a signed resolution, your contract automatically terminates. Insurability, here's what I would tell you. Insurance is getting harder and harder. Get your buyers on it quickly. Give yourself a little more time in those deadlines. Due diligence documents, this is probably one of my other hot ones. Casey's probably gonna go, yeah, she hates these things. Due diligence documents, make it relative. If you've got solar, and it actually calls out solar in your copy of any solar power plan, you might in 10.6.1 put in specific documents. Now I got a longer list of things here just again, help me remember. If I'm writing an offer at 10:30 at night, some of you that call me late at night know I'm probably asleep, so I need some help. So in my template, I've got different things in here. Here's what I'm gonna tell you. Make your due diligence documents property specific. Okay? If you're buying a property, what's property specific of things that my buyer won't want? Well, let's just say that hailstorm came through and they just put on a new roof. And so you maybe want a copy of the roof warranty, and maybe it's got a transferable warranty to it. Maybe you want a copy of the roof permit. If it's a flip and they ripped down a bunch of walls and probably did a bunch of structural stuff, you may want a copy of the permits. You may not, your buyer might not care. It's not up to you, it's up to them. When I bought my house, it was only 2 years old. Most of the time, your builder warranties go beyond 2 years. It sees some of the components of it, right? I asked for a copy of the builder warranty. I wanted to know what it was. If you have a typical house, what could you possibly find in due diligence documents that's going to change your buyer's mind in purchasing? Do you really care about the home inspection they got when they bought the house 10 years ago? Then stop asking for it. Because it doesn't matter anymore. I would say that probably on my personal clients, I don't even ask for due diligence. Because half the times if there's something bad, the seller doesn't have it anyway. That's what your inspections. Okay, that was another one of Margaret's titles. 10.7, conditional upon sale of property. If they need to sell their house to buy the new house, this is where you're going to show the address of the home that they're selling. The listing agents, if it says does not, I would hope that there's an address in 10.7 with a deadline. Section 10.8, typically going to be does not acknowledge copy of the property disclosure, and then if there's a well or if not a well, you fill out the applicable check marks. Section 10.10 talks about lead-based paint. Any property that was permitted prior to January 1st, 1970, what? 8, need to have lead-based paint disclosure. I kind of go down the path that was built in 78 and asking for it, because you don't know when the permit was pulled. 10.11 talks about the fact that the house has to have carbon monoxide alarms, also talks about methamphetamine disclosure. These are things that I talked to my buyer about. Section 10.13 is a new part of the contract that actually talks about radon now. Okay, and you'll notice on the seller's property disclosure now that there's a section about radon, like when did they have it tested and what did it read? Section 12 is about closing documents and closing instructions. Closing instructions is, we can fill those out as listing agents. When I'm writing offers, I always say are not included with part of the contract. And honestly, now that the title companies have all gotten alignment with the commission, I just let them create that document and then we just sign it at closing. I don't do it prior to close. Okay. Section 12.3, who gets to decide when closing will be? Oh, some people will write seller, some people will write mutual agreement. Some people will put listing agent, some people will put each person for their own party. And what I want you to put there is the words title company. The reason I want you to put title company there is let's pretend the seller decides I'm not closing. They made me mad. Are we ever going to get mutual agreement? Oh, I'm not showing up. If you put listing agent, am I going to tell you when I want to do closing? And if you represent me, so are you going to go schedule it? Better not. So you need to have a third party, arm's length away, that in the event the two parties can't come to an agreement, who says, okay, closing's at this time. Whoever doesn't show up's in default. But if you keep it kumbaya, you're never gonna get there. And then God knows what'll happen to your earnest money. Okay? Disclosure, settlement, assignment of lease, transfer of deed. Your choices are special and general. Honestly, I don't care which one you use. Special only covers from the time that the seller has owned the property. General goes back to the beginning of time. The reality is, and Damien says this, he didn't say it last time. Well, you did too. We didn't go into the contract this time. Honestly, the title companies treat them the same, so it doesn't matter. So don't get in a fight about it. If you fill out on the buyer agent, you pick out general warranty and the listing agent comes back and says, we have to do special warranty. Go, okay. Doesn't matter. If you are working with an estate, you are going to check other, and you're going, oh, actually it's on there now. Personal representatives, so you're actually going to check it.
What line is that, Margaret, or what section?
As I'm strolling because I'm getting still, 13. So you're gonna check special, you're most likely gonna check special, general, or personal representatives. I've never seen anything different. Section 14 just says that all liens and encumbrances need to be paid in order for the property to transfer. thank God for title companies. Section 15 is all about who pays for what. So you've got the closing services fee. I want you to understand this. That is the fee that the title company charges to do the paperwork. It is not all of the buyer's closing costs. We had a situation, part of it was a language barrier, but we had an agent who explained that to her buyer, who only spoke Spanish. And she told him that meant that the seller was paying half of their closing costs. You are right, my friend. Oh, God. Guess who paid half of the buyer's closing costs? The agent did, right out of her commission. 15.3 association fees. When I'm writing these, I just go seller. If they don't like it, they can just counter me. Now, record change fee, most people, you do see seller, okay? The reserves and working capital, this is the one that the title company and even Damien will tell you, that should be a buyer fee. Because it's a future expense, it's a future thing when it's working capital, so the buyer's gonna get the benefit of it. And my argument is always, but isn't everything negotiable? This is how you find out how strong the listing agent is on the other side. When they just sign it and I check seller, what did they just tell me? They don't understand the contract. Casey, how much is working capital out at Windsor Gardens these days? How many thousands?
Oh, I don't know an exact amount, but it's not cheap.
Not cheap.
Actually, Windsor Gardens has that one and it's 6 months. Windsor Gardens voted it down.
Okay. So, I mean, think about it, right? That could be several thousands of dollars. So, again, all of this is negotiable and all of this is a strategy. I'm just sharing with you what I do. Because who do I work for? My client. Right? Now, if I'm a listing agent and reserves or working capital is check seller, I'm countering that so fast to make that a buyer expense, you'll never know what happened. Right? Other fees, I throw that to the seller. Local transfer tax, I throw that to the seller. We don't typically have sales use tax, but I throw that to the seller. Private transfer fees, I make that the seller. Water transfer fees, we don't have a lot of them. If they are, they're super small. I just put in a dollar amount of $250 because we've never seen them exceed that. I make the seller pay for that. And then I let the buyer do the utility transfer fees to move Excel Energy from their current residence to their new one. I think that was big on me. Okay, get my car sarcasm, guys. Come on, start laughing. Okay. All right. FERPTA. This is foreign investor. This just is basically a disclosure that in the event the seller is a foreign person, that there's tax implications to that. The listing agent's gonna know that, or the title company's gonna get it. So when I'm writing the offer as a buyer's agent, I'm just flying over that unless somebody's told me that they are. Colorado withholding, again, this is more for the seller. If the seller is selling a property and they're moving out of the state of Colorado, or they are not a Colorado resident, they are subject to sales tax withholding.
How much was that again? I forgot how much it is.
Colorado's 2%. FERPTA is that 15 max?
I think 15 and then it drops.
Yeah, there's all,
Yeah,
the title companies are a lot smarter than I am. That's one of those things that you learn in school you can forget.
okay.
Okay. Along with 90% of the other stuff Kathy taught you to get here.
Okay.
Okay. Prorations taxes, the most common is most recent mill levy and most recent assessed valuation. Rents, if you're buying a property where rents are received, are you going to have it done as actually received or accrued? If I were buying a property like that, I would want it on actually received. But it can go either way, it doesn't matter. Other prorations, I just like to write the word any applicable. One of the things that a lot of us miss when we're in the city and we start going out in some of these other areas where they have propane heat. Be aware that depending on how full that tank is, there could be a proration for the gas that's in the propane tank that the seller paid for. So you're gonna wanna make sure that, especially for the listing agent with a propane tank, that you're having that checked So that way the buyer, the title company knows how to do that. When we sold my uncle's property, he says, tell him that's a gift from me, I don't wanna go through it. That was pretty nice of him, because I don't know if any of you guys bought propane. Association assessments. Seller, please. And then you write none other unless you know that there is a, special assessment. I don't have time to tell you the story about the time I saved my client $14,000 because I checked the correct box. Possession in section 17, this just defines when possession is and what happens if the seller doesn't give up possession on time. You want to make sure that whatever that daily rate is, it makes sense for them to want to get out. Okay? So be thoughtful of that, right? Like, I want to make sure that they would be more than happy to go spend a night at the Westin and pay for overnight storage in the moving truck than to stay in my house. If you put $100 there, they're just gonna stay in the house because it's cheaper to stay in the house and fight with you. Okay?
What's your value? 500?
It depends on the property. If I am buying some of those big houses in Candelas, which could take them a really long time to pack up, that might go to 1,000. So again, I want to make it simple. Section 18 talks about what happens if the property is damaged or condemned. Read it yourself. Section 18 for Mr. Buyer, this just shows that you have the right prior to closing for us to do a walkthrough and verify the property is in the condition we expected it to be in and any of the repairs that we negotiated as part of the inspection process. Bob one time did a walkthrough during a team rally here. He did it on Zoom. He literally went through and was turning on all of the faucets, make sure that there wasn't any leaks. He made sure that there was hot water. Like, he was checking everything. He probably would have found out there wasn't a garbage spill. Okay. Do not ever check specific performance for your buyer. Don't do it. Please do not do it. The next part talks about what happens if either party's in default. Here's the parts I do explain to my buyer. Mediation. Mr. Buyer, in the event you and the seller get into a dispute in section 22, you agree to go to mediation first. Mediation, you split the costs of the mediator. In the event that you cannot come to a resolution through mediation, then you will each have your own attorneys and you will go to court, and basically the losing party will pay the fees of the other party. Now, you probably had that similar conversation when you did the exclusive right to buy or exclusive right to sell, because we have that same conversation there. But it's always good to refund it here. Okay? Talks about what happens in the event there's an earnest money dispute. Talks about the buyer having the right to terminate. Talks about physical delivery in section 28. Do not, starting to see this, and Damien talked about it last week, 26.2. There are agents out there who want to write the word text message. Please don't. You want everything in writing like email or CTM. I typed in your internet, I don't really know. The other thing I don't like about this paragraph, and I'm starting to see this from some other agents when I'm looking at offers, and I kind of like it. They're going down into additional provisions and they're removing the word facsimile out of 26.2. How many of you have a fax machine?
I actually do. It's attached to my printer.
Okay, you are one of the few. The office
It's all one
doesn't,
unit.
the office doesn't have, so you have a dedicated fax line?
Oh, well, I don't know, I've never used it. Never
Oh,
used it,
but
but it's an option.
Right, but if you don't have a fax phone, if you don't have a fax number, how do I fax you?
Oh, yeah, because we don't have a landline.
So you don't have a fax machine.
You can get them fairly cheap. I used to have one. It wasn't like an internet fax.
I have one on my computer.
So they like, comes through the internet, but you get a phone number.
But I only use it to send faxes because some of the financial institutions still want faxes. When you start taking money out of your retirement funds, they wanted it faxed, which is so dumb. So there are agents out there who are being very smart and going down into conditional provisions and saying in section 26.3 or 26.2, facsimile shall be striked out.
And that in addition.
Okay, I'm starting to like that idea because, heck, I saw some of you looking at each other going, I saw it. Don't worry, I won't call you out, but I saw you. Okay, 29. Okay, as a result of some little event in August, 29 became super important. And because this is recorded and I don't know who listens to it, I can't give you specific percentages. Fair? Okay. 29.1, you're going to fill in the percent or whatever the compensation is that the buyer's agent is going to get, that the seller is going to pay. So the seller might pay 2.5 apples. They might pay 3 oranges. Or something in between. That's what goes there. 29.1 is what is the seller on the seller settlement statement going to reflect that he is paying to the buyer's agent. Got me? Okay. 29.2 is the percentage or compensation that the buyer is going to pay to his own agent. Okay, so again, it could be whatever it is. It could be 1 apple, it could be 3 oranges, it could be, Jen had one the other night that it was 6 avocados, which blew both of our minds, right? 29.3, the only time you use this. By the way, we've had this now for over 6 months, 8 months. No one's doing this. I've not seen a single contract. The only time you use 29.3 is if the buyer's agent and the seller's agent executed a brokerage compensation agreement prior to the offer being submitted. None of us are doing that, so don't use it. Now, you could have a scenario where 29.1 and 29.2 are both completed. The buyer's agent and the buyer might have an agreement that the buyer's agent is going to get paid 6 avocados. But they want the seller to pay 2 avocados. So in 29.1, they're gonna show 2 avocados. And in 29.2, they're gonna show the additional 4 avocados. Follow me?
But do you check both if it's like in the event that the seller doesn't pay, or you already know how much they're gonna be paying?
So when you write, if you're going in, how do I say it? When I'm calling a listing agent prior to submitting the offer, I do ask the question, is the seller contributing in any way, shape, or form to the buyer's reliability for compensation to the buyer's agent? Did you see how I worded that? What's the co-op? There is no such thing as co-op anymore. But is the seller contributing to the buyer's obligation to the buyer's agent? Isn't that a nice way to say that? Instead of how much you're paying.
How long ago did they get rid of that co-op? Was that in
August 17th, 2024. It's no longer in the MLS, okay? So, here's the thing. I'm gonna ask, so let's pretend that the seller's paying 2 apples. But we're writing a really strong offer. Does that mean that my buyer can't ask for the seller to pay 3 apples? No, no. The buyer can request in this offer whatever they want. There are listing agents out there, many of them. I don't agree with their strategy, I'm gonna say that, but it's their strategy. When I ask that question, they say, the seller is willing to pay compensation to the buyer's agent. However, they're going to be reviewing the overall terms and price and everything in the offer. So just submit whatever you think is appropriate in your offer. They're saying that out there. So of course I'm gonna tell my buyer, like, what do you want me to do, right? You're committed to me for 3 apples. How do you wanna do it? We'll ask them to pay the whole 3 apples. We're giving them full purchase price and we're not asking for any concessions and we're giving them the closing fee. You might get your 3 apples. If you've got the client who's lowballing 10% under list price, not that we have any of those, but they're lowballing 10%, don't laugh, Luke, we actually had one this week. 10% under list price, we're probably not getting our 3 apples. So Mr. Buyer, how do you want to structure this, right? And depending on the market we're in, these are all different levers that your buyer can use. If I go back to 2022, I kind of wish we would have had this. Because the buyer, instead of paying $50,000 over market now value, might have been much more happier to pay my 2.5% to 3% apples versus paying that much over, but it still put more money into the pocket of the seller. We're not in that market right now. But it could have been a lever. It could have been a lever that my buyers paid title insurance. It could have been a lever that my buyer paid the property taxes for the full year and the seller didn't have to prorate it. All these things, this is why understanding the contract is so important. Because depending on the market you're in, you can pull different levers to get your client where they need to be. Nowhere in 2021 and 2022 did any of us talk about, well, how about if we just had the buyer pay our compensation? We didn't have this conversation. Today we would. And it might be just the lever that the buyer says, I'm willing to do that. If it means I get the house and I don't have to pay significantly over market. Because here's the other thing. Paying your compensation is an expensive sale. Which means if they sell the house, it offsets part of their capital needs. Paying over market value is not. So depending on who your buyers are, we see how this works, because the seller ultimately cares about one thing, and what is it? How much money are they walking away with? What's the net? I don't care how we get there. I don't care how we get there. That's something else coming in my pocket. Okay. All right. Additional provisions, section 30. This is where you're gonna put different things in there. Right? Maybe you're gonna put the broom clean. You gotta come to my clause box. Okay. Your house has to be broom cleaned. It might have escalation clauses. It might have appraisal gap coverages. It might have all those things. Let's go there. Section 31.1.1, if you're using post-closing occupancy agreement, you're gonna put that box. Any other documents that are part of the contract, they don't have this very feasible, but if you're doing a lead-based paint disclosure of sales, you want to show that there too. Woo! Then in section A, buyer's agents, you want to say, do you or do you not acknowledge receipt of the earnest money? It just does not. I don't want the earnest money, that's a risk, I don't want to be responsible for it. And then how am I working with the client? Am I the agent? Am I a transaction broker, or are they a customer? And then the listing needs to fill out section B without saying anything. We went over, my apologies through the time. What questions do you guys have?
I have to adjust it first.
Yeah. So here's how you get good at this. Go practice with each other. Maybe you're working an open house this weekend and it's quiet. Practice going over the contract as if you're presenting it to the buyer. Practice as if you're reviewing it with the seller. Read it. If you made a commitment to yourself to read one section of the contract to buy and sell per day, you have the entire contract read in 30 days. The better you know the contract, the better you serve your client, regardless of which side you're on. All right, what'd you take away? Zoomland, give me one. What did you learn today you didn't know before?
To put more money in the post-closing occupancy thing.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that because we didn't run out of time. We didn't talk about post-closing occupancy. We do that in
The
separate.
deposit, like if they're staying there, make it worth it.
Yeah, and Jadian talked about that last week. We're not gonna go over that here. What else did you learn specific to the contract to buy and sell?
I liked how you talked to the agent about asking for the compensation instead of, or how you
Okay,
ask about the obligations instead of compensation.
Love it. Okay, in the room, what'd you learn today?
The sales contingency being again.
Sales contingency, good. How about the difference between a range and an oven? Right? Like, that's so funny, but it's so critical when you get into it. So thanks you guys for coming and play today. I hope this is how you do it. Next time you take a contract class, bring those same hit sheets back. All right, see you all later.
Thank you.
Got any update on the open house, Margaret?
Hold on, let me end this.